What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel, and welcome back to the From Computer to Cardboard series. The Against the Storm board game has been coming along really well, and I'm very excited about its progress. Now, we've spent all this time, we've just, in the last episode we went through, we did all the Photoshop work, we've done all the guillotining, we have now sleeved up and put together the entire game. Now, let's have a look at what it looks like on the table.
Alright, so this is what the setup looks like on the table. I'm going to kind of run through the different things real quick, but this is kind of what the table presence is like. So let's start off with, this is the starting setup for the Lizard player. I've put two of the linking cubes together to make pseudo meeples. This is what I had access to. This is your Lizard's Resolve reminder card and kind of where you track how many guys you have left. This is what the starter deck looks like. So you get an extra Trapper's Camp and an extra Furnace for being a Lizards player, and then you get two of every other resource thing. Alright, and then after that you have this little section at the bottom. This is like where your resources are collected. So if I had harvested one meat, I would put a resource cube onto the meat card. This is something that could have been a player board or something, but cards are just way easier to make. And then as you add new and more complicated resources, that like more cards will just get added, so it will just get bigger and kind of sprawling really quickly. Next over here we have the different resource nodes. So these are the ones that start out when you gain a building. For example, this starting furnace, these nodes would be added. So we would add copper bars, skewers, and pies to these resource nodes, and that would get populated with resources as you go through and craft stuff. We then have the buildings shop. So when you complete Queen's orders, you will gain buildings from here. Otherwise, you can pay the cost of leather, planks, and bricks in the top left to purchase these structures and add them to your deck. You can see that the building deck is quite large. And then the last thing over here is kind of like the state of the game kind of trackers. We have the Impatience, which tracks your loss condition, where it will collect red cubes, and then you lose the game if there's 50 points there. Then we have the Queen's orders. So if I can deliver 2 jerky, then I'll complete this order, gain 1 reputation point, and I'll get a free building as well. And we have 20 reputation points wins the game, so any reputation points will be collected from here. Then we have the season tracker, so it's currently in the storm season, but the other seasons are there underneath. And then if there's any plagues revealed for it being the storm season, then that will be here. And that's kind of it. That's kind of the whole setup for the game. It does get really sprawling. This is just for one player. You would have a whole second one of these with like beavers or harpies, and then their own separate starting deck, and then many more resource nodes come out and kind of spill out everywhere. But that's kind of how it all came together.
Okay, so now that I have the entire game together, it's time to take it to our regular playtesting night, which is called Tabletop Tuesday. That is Sydney's monthly regular in-person playtesting event that I've been going to for many years now. We're going to take the game with us, we're going to set up the whole thing, and my friend Ryan is going to help us play through the game as best we can. Now, I know it is very, very large, so rather than playing until the game reaches a natural conclusion, we're going to play through a snapshot of the game to get an idea of how the mechanics different work, get like an idea of what, you can get a feeling for the size of the game and how it all comes together, the main mechanics, how it works, and then we're going to ask Ryan what he thinks about the game, how it came together, and maybe suggestions for what should change for the future of this project. So Tabletop Tuesday is a fantastic place that I spend a lot of time at when it comes to testing out game designs, having a look at things and how they work and come together. And it's really good for getting feedback from other designers and seeing what they liked about it, and kind of like networking and all that kind of stuff as well. So you can kind of see that we've set it all up on the table. We've got a 2-player setup, whereas before when I kind of showed off, I just had the 1-player setup. I was playing as lizards. Ryan was playing as beavers. Each of them has different specific things that they want. And so that's kind of how the different co-op nature works. We both have slightly different goals for when it comes to collecting and resolve. The whole game is quite sprawling. It is a big table monster. And also I realized that some of the cards were missing. Some of the basic resource cards that are required for tracking them were missing. So I didn't have planks, bricks, or copper bars, which is kind of, they're really important actually. So we just had to play some face down cards and remember which ones were which is not hard if you just do it alphabetically. It's a little awkward to have forgotten something so important to the game. But we played through the game. Everything went pretty well. I had to reach for the rulebook a couple of times for the more specific parts when it came to earning reputation through resolve. And we kind of followed the exact same gameplay loop, making very similar choices throughout the whole thing. But let's get right onto the couch and we're going to ask him exactly how this whole thing went. And we can get a little bit of a look into what the playtesting process all comes together like. First of all, I need to introduce you. This is Ryan Cross, who is disproportionately not in frame. I fixed it slightly.
There you go.
So you've been a part of the Tabletop Sydney scene for quite a while now.
Yep.
If you saw the Soli review video that I put up on the channel, Ryan was the one actually playing the game with me at the time, holding my hand. Did you want to shout out anything people might be able to know and find before we get into the feedback?
Have a look at Anything You Can Do. That's a game that we kickstarted last year with Ahmad, who was also part of Usali. We've got a couple of games that I'm working on. I'll be demoing them at the upcoming Boardgame barbecue
Okay, nice.
event. And a few other events that are coming up, so that'll be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we just played Against the Storm, the board game.
Yep.
It was an experience.
Yep.
A few things went really well. A few things went really awkward. I think the main thing is there's a big pinch going from like the first couple of turns to like the middle couple of turns. So it makes seeing some of the later stuff a bit harder. Gaining some of the resources was really awkward, but completing the orders early and the rewards for doing that was really good. So that felt like the dopamine reward that we got from doing that was good. So we continued to do that one thing instead of focusing on other stuff.
Yeah.
So we didn't really expand our crafting tree beyond what the orders required of us. And the first couple of orders only required basic resources.
Yeah.
So we just sat there and continued to gather and spend basic resources. Because the other problem is that the punishment for not clearing out the Queen's orders is that impatience builds up over time. And
very quickly.
Even though the bottle that needs to be filled up with all of the impatience is large, you can't see that as a player. You see the big pile of cubes on it and you're like, oh fuck man, this is not going very well.
Yeah.
And
Well, and you essentially are getting a minimum of 3 impatience per turn.
Yeah.
And so if you don't do anything other than like if you are doing good and actually keep those sets of orders clear, that's still the minimum amount.
Yeah.
And so anything less than that basically just accelerates that component.
Yeah.
And I think that really creates an imbalance between focusing on that versus focusing on purchasing either the buildings or the other pieces.
Because when you complete the Queen's Order, you get a building added to your deck. We also had a problem where a lot of the buildings that were available in the shop weren't helpful. And this happens in Against the Storm, the game, because you get to pick a blueprint of 3 options. And oftentimes you're like, none of these things make what I need to actually do stuff.
Yeah.
But the problem was I had created a whole bunch of cards, which was the basic stuff that you start with, like Stonecutter's Camp, Trapper's Camp, stuff like that. And they showed up a lot. And it was like, we never really want these things that much. And so that was the book. I think they should be removed entirely. I think the costs for all of the buildings should be brought way down because it was so hard to make bricks and planks compared to everything else.
It was never more efficient or more advantageous to just buy the things rather than to focus on the...
Yeah. So you played beavers, I played lizards. You playing beavers, you start with a workshop, which makes planks and bricks. Me starting as the lizard, I can make copper bars. Now, I never made copper bars, and I never could make planks or bricks. I never actually bought a thing that did.
I think I made 1 plank.
Yeah. And so in Against the Storm, that is the main resource that builds all of your things, right? And instead we were just focusing on lots of minor things to get the quick reputation to complete the Queen's Orders.
So there needs to be a fix in the ability to go from just basic nodes to the tier 1 of nodes. I think the gap between those two things is too large. We kind of bumped up against that and went, well, we can't make this jump yet. What are we doing in the meantime to not lose the game?
I think one way to potentially do that would be to have some of the cards, particularly if they are species specific, to be, for example, instead of me having to actually contribute whatever it was to wood to make a plank, that would just that would directly give me plank.
Okay.
That may not work, but something like that to essentially accelerate you, and that way it's like
one's easier.
Because the other thing is, from a tech tree perspective, to get to the point, like I could see further down the game where it's like, if I was to actually complete whatever, let's say a tier 4, tier 5, like a luxury good.
Yeah.
I know this would make sense probably in the video game, but you would probably need the equivalent of what? 16 to 20 basic resources?
Yeah. So to make wine, you need 1 berries, 1 barrels, I think it is. Something like that. And then barrels needs 1 wood, 1 copper bars.
Yep.
Right? So that's 4. And then wine, 1 to 1 turns into luxury. So it's really only 5 resources spent.
Plus there's also additional cost in not only populating them and everything else. So I feel like there's probably an equivalence. I'd have to do the math, but it feels like probably more of an equivalence of roughly 10. Because you've got the 5 basic resource plus roughly 4 worker placements that are equivalent to that as well.
I think populating a node should probably be removed and just be, you can spend a guy, and that the first guy is collecting the wine. The second guy is hop, skip, and jumping any number of resources up the tech tree into the thing that you're trying to make.
There's something else there, but it's just...
Because the way I saw it was you're the beaver guy. You're really good at making planks. You go, here's 10 planks.
Yeah.
Cool. I go, well, I need some planks. I can pick from that node that you've put a whole bunch of resources on. But you go, hey, I'm the beaver guy. I'm going to make a plank. Here's 2. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Alright.
If that.
And then you take them both.
Yeah, because I need them to get something else.
Yeah. So I think it maybe doesn't quite work. Maybe it needs to magnify in some way. Like you spend the 1 berries and it makes 2 nodes or something.
The other thing that it could be, and this may just be to make it a little bit more manageable, is it might make sense to essentially further simplify and streamline the number of different resources and kind of components that you're working through. Yeah. Because one, that not only will that make it easier to manage at a board game level, but 2, it also means that you're more likely to hit the right number of things.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of having, I don't know, I think at the beginning we had,
most of the buildings are trying to make 2 to 3 options in a thing. We hit a couple that overlapped. We hit ones that made both boots and flour, and then one other third different thing from each other, which is a bit awkward. But we also hit several camps that does not make us a new resource as well. So we were kind of stuck at the beginning of the tech tree because of that problem additionally. So I think a few different little things compounded a lot to this problem. But the idea is that you would build lots of planks, you would build lots of bricks, and leather is easy to get. And then you would buy buildings on top of getting the Queen's Orders buildings for free. And then you go, well, actually, I bought so much shit, I actually still need more stonecutters camps to actually get basic resources, and it has value in being there.
Yeah.
But because we aren't able to do that and grow the buildings and stuff we have, it didn't quite work out.
The other thing that this wasn't really something we experienced or was a problem for us, but typically in a lot of deck builders, you want a mechanic to be able to get rid of cards in your deck, so that you have a bit more control or influence of what's in your deck.
In my head, that was trading.
Okay.
Where it's like, here, I'll give you this thing that doesn't really work for me, but maybe you don't have. But then you need to be able to trade with the unknown entity that eats the card and it's gone forever, maybe.
Something, yeah. There needs. I mean, like I said, there wasn't really a problem. I didn't necessarily feel that, I've got a bunch of crap cards in my deck, and that's why I'm having problems.
Yeah.
But it was more just a matter of, because each time by essentially having 3 to choose from, there was some times where it's like, nothing particularly great, but I can do something out of here.
Okay, so hang on. Here's an idea that might solve two problems. We create there's a mechanic in the video game where you sacrifice wood, oil, sea marrow, and coal, some of which we don't have in the game. And what it does is the hearth, the thing that keeps everyone safe from the monsters, burns brighter and lowers the threat level of the forest. And so what we could do is we have either the hearth or we have like a creature or something, and we have to tribute things to it, and that will remove impatience. So we feed it buildings that we don't want anymore. We spend a worker on the big toad creature or whatever. It eats a building, and then we remove impatience. And so it's like, we could go, oh no, we're about to lose. I'm going to feed a whole bunch of buildings. That might be a detriment for me because I don't have them anymore.
Yeah.
Or, I have some extra stuff. This is getting kind of annoying. I actually bought this thing and I got it as a reward. I don't really need it.
Yeah.
I'm going to spend a guy to tribute and get rid of it. And then it's going to, have a benefit, for me removing this thing.
Yeah.
In most deck building and deck shedding games, getting rid of stuff too quickly is almost always a way to break the game. But the deck building in this is not all of the actions that you have. It's more like a rondo where it's here's the options I have and I'm picking one. So I think it's probably not abusable in that way.
The other idea I was thinking about could be sort of similar, which is maybe one of the options is to say, if I've got the 3 cards, and whatever, building one of them or is that the right term? Building, acquiring, whatever.
Yeah.
Essentially gets you 1 resource for the worker placement, but maybe the option is, I can essentially burn it or whatever, sacrifice it, and that gives me, I don't know, say 5 of the thing. So you get this like big surge, but it's at a permanent disadvantage.
That's not bad. Especially if you have a high building income.
Correct.
You're like, I'm going to burn this thing now. I'm going to get 5. That's going to, complete the queen's orders, but I'll have some left over for later. That's going to give me a free extra building, and I get to solve this thing because it's got 5 impatience on it, and it's really important to deal with this problem now. Yeah.
I think that could also be potentially like enough of a boost to get over some of those dips that we were feeling.
Because it also didn't engine build. It also didn't go, okay, I've got my woodcutter's camp. It's getting me wood. I'm now spending the wood in my workshop, which is making planks. I'm then spending the planks to buy a building. So I'm spending the planks to build this next thing. It just kind of didn't happen like that.
And I think that was also, that was the thing that, there needs to be some combo elements to it where it's like, that's why I'm thinking okay, potentially having the ability for the beavers to directly get planks rather than having to keep doing that would also have that ability to be like, okay, I'm going to combo this with this with this. Could be a more powerful way of leveling up the ladder without it being
I also think we
stuck
need
at
to
the first level.
find a way to make guys just do stuff regardless of what hand you drew. Because there are some just whole turns where you're like, well, this guy's kind of useless. Where it's like, but I could trade off this thing or like this once per season ability to just put my guy wherever, and I'm going to do the thing that's like really timely. And
well, that could be the other thing is there could be some cards that don't require a worker to place into them, right? And again, that might, for certain cards, that might be another way of like, I get whatever, some free planks or some free whatever.
It would be a cool upgrade.
Yeah, or exactly, you can upgrade certain core resources.
So we have the rain collector, but in the video game there's a geyser collector, right? And there's specific water type geysers in the game, and then you can install a robot that just harvests the water for you over time.
Yeah.
So you can be like, well, I have this rain collector, but I'm going to upgrade it so that it doesn't require a guy, and it's going to be free every time I draw it, or something like that.
Or it could be an action that suddenly gets built into the season change, right? So in the same way that you repopulate the core resources, suddenly, you naturally now get whatever two storm waters or whatever else kind of thing.
Yeah, that could also work as well. And I think let's talk about bloat for a minute. Because I have insane component bloat. There's 275 cards, or something like that. It's 29 sheets of 9 cards, and then the last sheet has 6 cards. And I think 274 was just the number that I was closest without going over. And that's a lot of sleeves, and that's a lot of guillotining time and all this kind of stuff. I think a lot of it can be cut down by making tiles, which is a thing that I could have done but didn't want to do because making cards is much easier. And I did mention this earlier. And I think some of that would simplify things because you could express the tech tree a bit simpler. Part of the problem that you had, obviously having not played the video game, having not had some big illustrative piece that shows the tech tree, you're trying to figure out what makes what.
That was one of my first comments. Was like, you need an extra
Something.
reference, of like what this is going to be. Because I also didn't know if it's like a 20 level or like a 5 level.
Yeah. And I try to simplify it as much as possible, but it still is a bit complicated like
that. I think from a bloat perspective, I think, yes, it was a lot of cards. I think going back to some of the stuff we also touched on before is the number of Queen's orders. I think probably
the tiers need to change in size.
Some of that
I
needs
think
to change.
the most basic tier either needs to be bigger, so that you can. I'm in two minds about it actually. My original comment was to make the first one bigger because we were stuck in that phase for longer than we had those cards available, right? If in theory we fix that problem and we can get out of tier 1 at the same time, right? It just needs to match. The deck doesn't specifically need to change, it just needs to match whatever the actual game state is. Because we don't want to be sitting there getting reputation points for free all the time. It's also not action equitable for the most part, because you can see we had almost no resources all the time. Right? We weren't actually ever really accumulating bonus resources.
Yeah.
And so we're doing all of this constant short-term gain. It doesn't actually let us develop and move forwards, with the exception that we're getting the new buildings. And the new buildings weren't actually helping us bridge the gap from Tech 0 to Tech 1, right? And then when the Queen's Orders changes from the lowest tier to the second tier, we go, well, we can't keep up. And then we'll start accumulating reputation, we'll kind of lose. Basically what happened, we chose an endpoint, which was the end of the first year of the game. As for the number of years a game is supposed to be, I think we made it to 7 reputation, and that was doing just Queen's Orders, right?
Which is
Which is 1/3.
It felt like if we were able to keep up that pace, we probably would have been okay.
Yeah.
But we could also see the writing on the wall, and we were rapidly going to struggle to keep up that pace.
We had an order for scrolls, which already had 2 cubes on it, and was currently not able to be made with the buildings that we had.
We were probably...
So we were losing just that one card.
Even just, if we were lucky and not knowing what exact cards, we were probably at least 5 turns away from getting to be able to
keeping
solve
that pace means that it would be about 3 years to win. Each season gives you 3 impatience points for free, and there's 3 seasons to a year, so that's 27, which is half. Like the
so
ball size is 50.
You basically have you have a upper limit of about 6 years.
Yeah, and then the storm plagues come in after the 3rd year, right? So if you're off pace, it gets harder again at that point.
Yeah.
We died way before then.
Yeah.
So we didn't get to see any of these extra knobs and levers. So I think some of the core really works. I think the main problems with it are balancing.
Yeah.
And because of the nature of the game design, is it's not meant to be perfect. It's meant to be a proof of concept. I think some of the concept does work. I think most of the issues in the playtest, as always, is knobs and levers and maths, right? Which comes from iterating and working on it. If Hooded Horse, the publisher, does go, well, holy shit, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Please make this a real game. I'll fix the math problems. I'll fix all the knobs and levers and work on that.
And look, it's definitely feasible. I think that's people need to understand that just because it doesn't work, that's where a lot of the work is just doing the iterations and doing the balance.
We've played deeply shit games that I think could be good games one day.
Yeah.
So I think nothing is impossible. But again, it's a scope thing. I think I've already gone too big on the scope for what the prototype should have been. It should have been a small thing, but I was trying to so accurately capture the essence of what makes the game good. I like the large, complicated tech tree because I'm like, well, I have access to paste but not jerky, and I'm playing as lizards, and lizards want jerky, so I'm going to make choices based on that. And there's choices for each category of thing that these species prefer and stuff like that. And that's going to guide how my choices shape the game. And knowing which species I have access to is going to change how I make choices and stuff like that. And there's so many goods because maybe I might need some for this one niche thing or whatever, but maybe I can just ignore it or whatever.
I wonder, the other thing I'm just thinking about now is we had the centralized part where it was kind of we were
Where the nodes were.
tracking the nodes.
Yeah.
And that was essentially a common resource. It makes me also wonder if there might make sense to have a common resource pool. Because we were essentially having a common resource pool anyway.
Because we were both spending stuff. In theory, having it split is to avoid quarterbacking, which is why I intentionally made it each person has their own separate things. It's like, you can track all the beaver stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you go, well, no, hang on, I don't want to give you this wood because I need it to make this thing that makes my guys happy. And that's one reputation for us both.
Yeah.
But I'm in charge of tracking that. And that's why I made it separate initially. Otherwise, I would have just made it like we are all ostensibly helping the one guy do the thing. But it could just be played solo the same as it would be played for multiple people. You just need like more time or more awareness of what's happening. And so that's why you are playing as a species that has no overlapping goals with me for your specific reputation game. That's not the Queen's Orders, which is interesting because we interacted with none of that.
Yeah, we don't think we tracked any of that.
That's right.
Yeah.
We only interacted with the Queen's Orders, the shared goal. Now, the personal worker resolve,
that could also just be because
we didn't hit any tier 1 resources. I could have made skewers, but I was short. I had berries, but I was short on whatever the second thing was, I think, wood or something. And so I didn't bother, and I focused on making boots instead. And if I had not spent the boots on the Queen's Orders, I could have spent the boots to make me happy. Now, I have a carrot and stick problem where the Queen's Orders gets angry and gets angrier over time. My guy never gets any less happy if he doesn't have boots. So I think that's the thing that needs to be balanced. I really like the impatience building up over time because it distorts which orders have value to you and what choices you make. But the problem is it's imbalanced to the rest of the game because it's just so much more important than everything else. And it was intended to be more important at the beginning and fall off later because you get to a point where you can make the stuff fast enough for it not to become scary. And you can be doing that and making your guys happy at the same time, which is currently not feasible. Because there's nothing that lets you get 2 of a resource. There's nothing that makes you get resources any faster than 1 at a time. So I think there needs to be a thing where
and that's what I'm thinking. I think
it
there
gets
needs to
better or
be
faster later.
either the buildings or other things need to be.
We also fucked up, by the way. Every turn we only drew 3 cards, and you're supposed to draw cards equal to the number of workers that you have. I completely forgot about this until this exact second.
Oh, I thought that was the case, but I'm not sure that would have necessarily changed much.
You have, in theory, more options. However, a change that might be interesting is if you have multiples of the same building, you can get multiples of that resource. So if I flip 2 woodcutters camp, I go, well, here's my woodcutter guy, but I get 2 wood because I have the 2 woodcutters. And that means you go, I'm going to buy a 3rd woodcutters camp. I know I'm drawing 9 cards. And then I go, well, I have a full house of woodcutters camps and stonecutters camps. I got to pick where I'm going. Oh, I have 4 of a kind. I'm much more incentivized to pick the thing that has more stuff.
So combining that with a few. This is, I think, the interesting part is playing with some of these different little ideas and how they combine. So for example,
solve bigger problems.
Because for example, that would make sense, but then how that would interact with the ability to say, oh, I'm going to burn certain cards to make sure, because otherwise
I would removing cards from the deck, especially remembering that you're drawing 9 cards and your deck starts as like 9.
Well, it depends, right? You'd have to balance it off, right? I might burn a whole bunch of cards to guarantee that every turn I'm essentially generating whatever 5, 6 wood. But because of the way the tech tree works, it's like, but if you're only producing wood, that has a diminishing return to it. And so I don't know. I think there's something there.
Because the starting deck is 2 of all of the basic resources, including Rain Collector, and then 1 specialty building for the species. So you're playing beavers, you got the workshop. I was playing lizards, I got the furnace. So if I buy a 2nd furnace, I could play 2 furnaces and make extra boots or whatever, right? But I could, at any time, because I'm drawing 3 cards at the very, very start, I could still hit 2 stone cutters and still go, well, even though I need wood right now, getting 2 stone is still kind of good. And then getting the shelter, which gives you more workers, gives you bigger hand size, gets you scaling in the same way, more resources, which would have helped us catch up, get over the tier 1 hump. Because if we had bought a second workshop, we both had stamping mills, right?
Yeah.
So instead of me buying a second stamping mill, you get the second stamping mill, and you go, well, now I can make 2 copper bars at once.
Yeah.
Right? And becomes
Yeah.
more worth it.
Yeah, because we were like, oh, I've already got that one. You should get that one. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it would be like, no, you over
You
index
already
there.
have it. You already have it. You should double down.
Yeah.
So I think that would be an easy and good fix.
Okay. I'm sure there's plenty of other ways we could potentially solve some problems, but what do you think is the next step for you? Is this?
Well, the current scope was to get to prototype, play test it, and then go, how did we do? Right? Like a comment card. Because do you know John Cleo? He's one of the he runs Incubator Melbourne, for those that don't know. And a thing that he does commonly is he has a Google form with specific questions about his game that he wants answered. And my goal was to kind of get to that stage where I go, okay, I playtest the thing. I want to talk a little bit about, do a little bit of like a debrief kind of a thing. Go, well, what did work? Maybe what does solve things. Normally, when I talk about playtesting with people, I say that you should ignore feedback from people based on if it meets the criteria or not. I have a friend, Alan Cheshire, who always make a big game. I always make small game. This is actually the biggest game I've ever made a prototype for.
Okay.
And so when we go, well, Alan, what should I do to fix this thing? He'll go make it bigger. And then he would show me something and he would go, what should I do to fix this? I go, make it smaller. And so you have to always understand what a designer's coming from when it comes to their feedback, and plays will be the same thing based on their experiences and what they've done stuff. So very often someone will give you a suggestion and it's like, well, that's not going to solve the problem, or that doesn't matter. But I recognize the thing that you saw was a problem and I need to focus on that.
Yeah.
Right? However, with us, and because it's not a real project I'm working on, it's all concept, we go, that's a cool idea. We could try it. We could try burning stuff. We could try this big hand size, this multiple burnings thing. We could try all this other different stuff because it's all theory. It doesn't really matter. It's never going to really be a game unless if the publisher really wants it to. And I messaged them on Twitter and they have not replied. I messaged them on Twitter before the first episode went out and they're not replied. So it doesn't matter. It's not expecting it to be a game. The point of the series is to show what making a game really looks like.
Well, and I think building on top of that and going back to what we talked about, I think when I think about at this stage of a playtest, whatever else, so I come at this also from a background of product design, product management, not just in game design, but there's a lot of parallels. And what I have kind of transferred over to a lot of the game design stuff is the questions that I ask after a playtest depend on where I think the game is at.
Yeah.
Right? And so at the early stage, like the first prototype or even first couple of iterations of that, I think I start just asking like general questions about what's your overall experience? Like, do you thumbs up, thumbs down kind of questions?
How did you go understanding the rules? Were the rules too hard? Did I explain them good?
I mean,
stuff like that.
Yeah, not really. That kind of a question is usually reserved more for the very end of the game, or end of development. The first part is like, is the premise strong enough to continue development? Is there something here that's worth developing? Those types of questions usually the first stage.
Because if the answer is no, this is horrible, or
if it's like
I've played this game already, this is just exploding kittens.
Or if this is just not interesting, and it's like, oh, okay, this is probably worth just going back.
Is this game bad, or is that a target market mismatch?
Yeah, some of those kind of like really
filter it along.
I kind of almost always I ask people, it's like if I don't have anything else specific to ask them, it's usually like did you like the experience or did you not like the experience? Would you consider playing this again? And that's usually enough. And if they're like, well, like if it's a campaign game, it's like, would I play it again? Well, it's a one-shot thing. It's like, okay, would you recommend somebody else to play it?
Yeah. I love that moment in a playtest where it's just completed and you go, do you want to run it back? And they're like, wow. Yeah. And you're like, okay.
So
yeah, I get it.
Once I get past that point, as I get into more of the middle part of testing a game, I'll ask people general feedback, but I'll also then either have specific aspects I'm looking for, or I will ask them what's the best thing about the game, And what do you think? And what was either the worst thing, or what were the specific problems that you saw?
Yeah.
And I won't. And the reason why that's important is because a lot of times, even both other designers, like they'll immediately be like, "Oh, you should do this. You should make this.
You should add this."
Yeah. And it's like, okay, that might be a good idea, but I need to understand first what you think the problem is before that.
Yeah.
Because once I know what the problem is, I might experiment with 10 or 20 different potential ideas to solve that. And I think that's one of the things I've noticed that a lot of people miss is the idea of being specific about what the problem is, and then being come up with several ideas to address that.
Yeah.
Rather than what's the first thing that might address it? That doesn't necessarily make it a good idea to try.
Yeah.
And it's usually only when I get closer to the end where I'm like, okay, like is the teach good, or are the rules clear, or whatever else? Because usually until I get further down the line, those things don't matter, right? Tell me, questions about like the UX or like those kinds of things.
I bring up the teach because sometimes you run through the whole thing and they're like, everything was fine except this one thing was really hard for me to understand.
Sure.
And I go, okay, either that's in the teach or the components aren't telling it enough,
Correct.
or it was just too hard for the target market or whatever.
Yeah.
Which can happen. Like I've played games with my parents that I've made. Some of them have been really easy for them to pick up, and then some of them have been like, okay, hang on, we're on turn 20 and I'm still asking you some basic shit, and I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe it's too hard. And so sometimes a lot of the feedback needs to come from identifying, is this the guy you're making the game for or not?
Yeah.
But I do want to maybe cap it there. I don't want to steal all of your time.
Yeah.
Because kind of the purpose of this episode is to talk about the playtest, the community's part of it, right?
Oh yeah.
In Sydney we have Tabletop Tuesday. In Melbourne we have Incubator Melbourne. But there is tabletop playtesting groups all around the world.
I run one of the. We also do fortnightly playtest on our Discord as well.
Right. The Tabletop Game Designers Australia.
Yeah. And there's both that one. There's a number of others online as well, and that's actually really important for me because when I came into, I realized even though this is great and actually a much more rich environment to do playtesting, it's not frequent enough for
Monthly.
Yeah. And so being able to test, fortnightly or weekly really improves
and
the
also
velocity.
digital versus physical. I had to cut out 275 fucking cards and sleeve them, and that took forever.
And that's a whole other thing we talked briefly about before we were on camera about the different tools we use. Like some of the tools I use now, I spent a bit of time getting my process up. And you've seen some of the. I had a similar game that I had. Was it 180 plus cards? That I was able to. I rapidly iterate through those with the process, and I can actually playtest that. I can make changes across the whole board in like 10 minutes, whereas trying to do a printout and whatever else
takes forever.
takes forever, and it's expensive at a certain point as well. So yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap there. Join your local playtesting community.
Yeah.
Stick around from this video series because we're going to have a new game coming up next. So we're going to start from scratch. We're going to analyze the shit of it. We're going to have more celebrity guests come on and help us out. And we're going to have a look at building something new. I'm not going to reveal what it is yet. You'll have to stick around and find out.
All right, everyone say thanks, Ryan, in the comments for his help on this one. But that is the playtesting of the Against the Storm game prototype. Now, stick around for the next episode when I'm going to go and talk about some of the suggestions and stuff that we made here and maybe what kind of fixes that I would make to the game, what kind of iterations I think that the game needs to make to kind of get to what I think a finished version would more look like. And so I'm going to have a playlist up on the screen where if the next episode is out already, you can find it in there. Otherwise, if you missed some other stuff at the beginning, you can go and check that out as well. I will also have just like a random video up on there because there's other stuff on the channel that we do that is also kind of cool. There's a lot of game design stuff. There's also a lot of just let's play stuff. Something for most people. Maybe not everyone, most people. And as always, the subscribe button, because that is the only way for the algorithm gods to bless you with more interesting from computer to cardboard type content. So stick around on the channel because we're going to have some more cool stuff coming soon. In the next episode, we will wrap up on Against the Storm and we will announce what the next game in the series is going to be. So stick around because I think it's going to be quite exciting.